Okay, then let's go live. Perfect. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining this SAP community call, a bit shorter than usual, but to a very important topic. My name is Menina Chow. I'm part of the SAP community team and your host today. With me is Sebastian Wieczorek, who is global lead of SAP AI ethics, speaking about this topic today. And as always, this is a live call where you can chat with us, post your questions, comments, and we hope we can address them later on. With that, I have not much to say other than welcoming Sebastian with me. And yeah, the screen is yours, Sebastian.
Thanks a lot, Menina, and happy to be here and to give you an overview of AI ethics at SAP, and also to give you a glimpse into how we're executing what I'm going to show you in the first half of the call. So first overview, and then a bit about how we execute. So let me jump right into the topic. When we think about AI ethics, there are a lot of dimensions popping up. You can see here on the slide some of the most important ones. So we think about automated decisions. We think about fairness, not discriminating. Basically, we're thinking about transparency, explaining to people what systems are doing, what systems are not doing, privacy, how to handle person-related information, and of course, a big topic is human dignity. So respecting human autonomy, respecting freedom of speech, and other important human rights. And looking at all these dimensions, we at SAP right when we started with the topic of AI, we looked into this and we said, okay, we need to address these dimensions. These are these cannot solely be tackled in terms of technology, but they need some kind of overarching strategy that goes across the technology teams, the sales teams, the marketing teams, legal, and all the different functions that you can think of in a company, in a corporation, so that we're obeying to some minimum standards, or to some meaningful standards. Let's put it that way. And what we have been doing, I think, as the first European company following that, was we were starting to define guiding principles on AI. And you see here 3 of our 7 guiding principles on this first slide. We have 7 guiding principles, and the first 3 ones, they are foundational principles. So we said, and you see, you can read them here for yourself. We said that we are driven by our values, that we design for people, and that we enable business beyond bias. So saying that we're committed to human rights, that we put people into the center of what we're doing and have a human-centric design of our systems, and that we're taking discrimination serious, and that we want to foster fairness in what we're doing. These are the first 3 guiding principles. The second triple of guiding principles are core principles. So what we're things that we're doing. So we're striving for transparency and integrity in what we do. We uphold quality and safety standards, and we place data protection and privacy at our core. So you see that these are principles that are defining how should we interact, what should we do, how should we design our systems. I think it's clear that transparency is a very important thing, so that humans understand that they're interacting with an AI system and what they should be expecting. Quality and safety standards, of course, are important especially when dealing with humans. And data protection and privacy, so taking it seriously, that we're putting humans into our center, means that we're protecting their person-related data, and that we're trying to avoid using person-related data if we can avoid it. And the last principle here, the seventh one, is a relational principle. It says that we don't want to do that in isolation and just in our own chamber and implement it there, but that we also want to lead a dialogue with externals, that we want to go out there, engage with the broader society, with people who are taking part of, let's say, the lawmaking communities, that we're listening to our stakeholders, and that we're also providing advice to people who are asking us. And this is what we're also upholding. Next, I want to show you the overall structure that we set up in order to manage AI ethics at SAP. At the center of it, there is the AI ethics steering committee, and this AI ethics steering committee is basically comprised of senior leaders across the company. So from all different functions that I mentioned earlier, they're coming from strategy, HR, data protection, legal, of course, also from technology side, and I'm also a member of the AI Ethics Steering Committee representing a development organization in this. Supporting the AI Ethics Steering Committee, we have an AI Ethics Advisory Panel that is comprised of external experts that are coming from academia, from politics, from industry. They provide input to the discussions that are happening in the AI Ethics Steering Committee, and as the name suggests, they're also advising us on organizational challenges, on the guiding principles and policy and other artifacts that we're creating, and on concrete use cases that we're engaging with. And the third pillar that we have is the Trustworthy AI workstream. That's basically a collection of employees, a team of employees that are tasked with the execution of the decisions that the AI Ethics Steering Committee is taking, and with the execution of processes that have been defined. And my role as global lead of AI ethics is to lead this Trustworthy AI workstream. If you want to know more about this structure, you can visit our website. There you can see who exactly is the member of the steering committee. We're also publishing who is member of the advisory panel. And you also find more information on the guiding principles. What you also will find, and I will go into some details, is you will also find the AI ethics policy that we have been creating, also that is published on our AI ethics website. So we created this AI ethics policy after we defined the guiding principles that I have showed you, with the intent to clarify and to translate the guiding principles into concrete tasks and requirements that people have to follow at SAP in order to stay compliant with the overall guiding principles. So it's a set of instructions, intents, and expectations that SAP is setting globally for all organizations and employees worldwide. We're publishing that externally so that you can read it as well, so that our customers and partners are also can look into this and on the one hand side get informed about SAP's way to dealing with ethical challenges, as well as to maybe get inspired and take information into their own processes as well. So that's obviously also something that we would be happy to see. Most importantly for us is that this AI ethics policy, as I'm going to describe it, is binding for all the SAP employees worldwide. So we're quite proud that we managed to set this up in a way that is binding for everybody. So it's a common set of rules and internal regulations in order to compliantly deal with AI ethics in development and in all the other, not only in development, but in all the activities that we're conducting. So This AI ethics policy has three main parts. One is dealing with human agency and oversight. One is addressing bias and discrimination, and the third one, transparency and explainability. So these are basically the core blocks in which we organize the different intense requirements that I mentioned. So human agency and oversight is determining, structuring how to safeguard human autonomy, and of course is particularly looking into areas of automated decision making. Addressing bias and discriminations is of course dealing with avoiding patterns of marginalization, of inequality, and of discrimination, or in other words, to establish fairness. And transparency and explainability then is dealing with transparency of the development processes on the one hand side, and of course also with transparency and explainability of the AI's decisions. So what basically the system's behavior, so to say. So these are the aspects of this third part. In order to operationalize the AI ethics policy, we created a handbook, and this handbook we also published, so you can also find that. What we try to do with that, and I hope that it's working, is that we rules and regulations and requirements and put them into context so that people who are working on certain use cases understand at what point in time, in which process step of my creation or sales or deployment of AI assets do I have to look at what requirements, which roles have to be involved. You can see here that there are also role icons to that, and what are examples of what people have to take care of. And here in this picture, you see that there are some information about human agency and oversight in the phase of productization. Productization is the phase that is coming after experimentation, and is basically dealing with the integration of integration of AI assets into production landscapes. So for this phase of development, and then afterwards you would see the next phase would be operations, I think. In this phase, there are specific requirements that then need to be adhered to, and then when they're done, of course, the process can go into the next phase. And for each of these phases, you get information about human agency and oversight, and the two other aspects that I showed you as well. There, in the AI ethics policy, there are also information about certain, let's say, certain processes that we obey to in order to avoid use cases that are going against guiding principles. So there are so-called redline cases, and the definition of redline cases is that they're violating personal freedom of humans, that they're mingling with society specific topics like freedom of speech or electoral systems, or that they're damaging towards the environment. And cases that are targeting this kind of aspects, they are defined as redline cases in our policy, and therefore should be stopped immediately. We're putting that into the policy. I think there are lots of reasons why we at SAP are not interested in going into this area, and I have to say that I have never seen a use case that was attempting to go into this direction, but we want to make it very explicitly for our internal and external stakeholders and communities that we at SAP are not going to engage in these areas, period. But there are two other case or types of cases. You see here high-risk cases and standard cases. And what we decided as part of the AI ethics policy is that we're going into a review for all the use case to determine whether they're, from an AI ethics perspective, high-risk cases or standard cases. So redline cases, of course, we also classify, but as I said, they're stopping, so there's no follow-up action needed. But in order to determine whether a case is a high-risk case, we're asking 5 simple questions. If you, the first question is are you processing person-related data in this use case? And it doesn't matter if you do that for the training aspects of the AI system or then during inference or during production. If you're processing person-related data, then you have to answer the other 4 questions. If you don't, then from an ethical perspective, we decide that it's straightly going into the standard case, which has some obligations in terms of self-assessment, but I will come to that on the next slide. If your use case is processing person-related data, then you're going on with the questions, and the other 4 questions, if one of those you answer with yes, then it's a high-risk use case. Only if you answer all other 4 questions with a no, then you go to the then this use case that you're classifying as a standard use case. First question of the remaining ones is, are you processing sensitive personal data like information, like biometric information or information about gender or sexual orientation, religion, this kind of information? Next question is it possible that the AI system is negatively affecting individuals in any kind? So that means physical or in their depriving them of rights or making it harder for them to get access to something like that. Next question, is automated decision making part of the AI solution? So does an AI system exhibit some form of automated decision making where humans are not involved and carrying over the process? And the last question is this use case part of a high-risk sector? And here, high-risk sector is defined as is it an HR use case, for example, or is it a use case where a public agency like police or border control is involved? These we're defining as high-risk sectors. So if one of these 4 questions is also answered with yes, then it's a high-risk use case from an ethical perspective. What is important to understand is that high risk doesn't mean that SAP is not following up on it, but that SAP is basically more careful about how to implement this use case and how to assess this use case. Maybe also importantly, because that's something that in many of the public regulations is handled differently. So when you look, for example, into the AI Act that the EU is creating at the moment, there's also a risk classification into high-risk cases and I don't know, standard case or other cases. The outcome of this means that you're either have to obey to the regulation or you don't have to obey to the regulation. For the SAP AI ethics policy, this is different. So the policy is binding both to standard cases and to high-risk cases. Only the assessment is changing. So if we look at the process that follows, you do the risk classification, and that's what the use case owner has to do. And the use case owner is then reporting the documented risk classification to the board area AI lead. That's the first step. And depending on whether it is a high-risk use case or it is a standard use case, a steering review is conducted. So for high-risk use cases, it means that a central AI team is looking at the case, is reviewing and interacting with the use case order to prepare a steering committee meeting where all the documents and all the decisions and all the related information to the AI ethics policy are documented, and then in the steering committee meeting, a decision is taken on what grounds this use case can be developed and should be moving forward. And what usually happens is that we're looking into all different aspects of the policy and then are defining what are security measures to those, especially to those aspects that make this case a high-risk use case. Obviously, the policy assessment, as I said, is also happening for a standard use case. Then they're conducted by the use case owners on their own, but of course they also are following the same principles. So they go through the policy, they check the requirements, and they're documenting how they are mitigating the risks, that the ethical risk that these standard cases may exhibit. And with that, I hope I gave you a brief overview of what we're doing and how we're handling AI ethics at SAP. Thanks a lot for listening, and I'm happy to answer your questions if you have any.
Thank you, Sebastian. Very interesting also to see the processes and the different classifications. For those of you watching the recording or looking at the live chat, we also posted the link to where you can find all the information that Sebastian has shared. Now it's up to you. All your questions are very welcome. We're here to answer them. Maybe to start with some. Now, Sebastian, that you talked about the different classifications, standard, high risk, and red. It's also very theoretical right now, but I think it would be really great if we could see or hear from you some examples. If you can share what a standard or high risk case is, that would be great.
Sure, happy to do that. So first of all, maybe it's interesting to hear that according to my own statistics, looking at the different cases, we have, let me go back to this, we have about 95% of use cases at SAP that we're working on in standard cases. So just so you get a gist of what's the ratio between high-risk cases and standard cases. And these standard cases are cases like, for example, you have like every company probably has that challenge. You have incoming payments that are paying invoices that you send out, and you need to match those. So you need to understand which of your clients has been paying for which invoice that you have been sending. So there's an AI algorithm that is doing an automatic matching of incoming payments to the invoices that you paid out. There's when you go through this process, there is no processing of personal data because it's in the B2B business. The use case, and with that it's a typical standard case. Things like predictive maintenance, so looking into when does machinery equipment needs to be changed in order to not break and stop the production line for a longer period to repair. This is a classical standard case, and there are many more standard case. As I said, most of our use cases, 95% and more, I'd say, are standard cases. But then we're also delivering high-risk cases. For example, we have a learning recommender in SuccessFactors. It's embedded in an HR process where we're advertising to the employees of our customers what are interesting learning courses based on their profile and based on their career ambition. And of course, it's processing personal data. I'm not sure whether it's also processing sensitive personal data, but it's not so relevant here because HR, as I explained, is a high-risk sector, and processing personal data in a high-risk sector already means it's a high-risk use case. So without me knowing much about the implementation, it's clear that the learning recommender that we're providing to our customers is one of these high-risk use cases, and especially on the HR side. In some cases also on the customer relationship management side. So everywhere where we're processing person-related data and driving some decisions from that, there are potentially high-risk use cases. And you see, when I'm talking about it, going back to the case of a learning recommender, I think it's clear it's a high-risk use case in the sense that it fulfills the properties, but it doesn't mean that it's a harmful use case, right? So I think that we can all agree that it makes sense to help employees to understand what are meaningful courses, how can I figure out what are meaningful career steps for me, what is material that I can use in order to prepare myself for example, if I'm a developer, to become an architect or a security expert.
Thank you. Yeah, that's super brilliant. For those that maybe just joined and didn't see the beginning, I mean, you shared the guiding principles. Can you share again how did those guiding principles were developed as those that you say, the ones that we are focusing on and relying on?
Yeah, that's our magic. I have to say. So, what we, as I said, we were engaging and are engaging with a lot of different people. We have the advisory panel that comprises of also academic experts that were supporting us in defining these guiding principles. What also happened was that SAP employees, so my former manager, was part of the study group for the European Commission on AI. I was part of a commission for the German Parliament, where we also had interactions and discussions about guiding principles. And what you see when you look at nowadays, lots of companies, especially tech companies, have AI ethics guiding principles. You see that it's converging. So these guiding principles are now, I would say, coming to standardization. We see that the OECD put out guiding principles, that UNESCO put out guiding principles that, in my opinion, are covering very well and matching very well what we at SAP are doing. So, of course, we're reviewing what we have been doing, but I would say we are quite fortunate that we hit the major ones also 5-6 years ago, influenced by what the EU Commission, or what was discussed in the EU Commission, what was discussed in Germany, and also what was discussed in research communities that we had access to.
Awesome, thank you. And last question from my side, how are you yourself staying up to date with the topics AI and ethics, which are just so dynamic fields?
Yeah, I think like everybody does, I think we're living in exciting times, and there's every day there's something new getting posted, and yeah, I'm generally interested in the topic. I'm also, in my free time, I'm looking into what is happening, what are people saying about it, what does it mean if we now have foundational models, what does it mean, like ChatGPT, what does it mean for us as humans? What does it mean for corporations? How do we want to interact with these technologies? How do we want to leverage them for the good, for all these interesting opportunities that we're seeing out there? And how do we want to safeguard that that we're not for some reason misusing them, deliberately or not, or that they're getting misused by people that we're entrusting them with. And I think these are, in my opinion, super important and interesting topics. So it's easy for me to stay informed by just looking at what is out there and what is interesting and what's coming up.
Thank you, Sebastian. It's really great. Really appreciate your time being here, sharing about AI ethics and also your personal point of view and thoughts and insights. For the audience out there, you have some links that you can click and connect with Sebastian and read about AI in SAP Community, or about AI ethics on sap.com. Many ways for you to stay up to date about this topic, but most importantly, to really exchange with others on this topic. For that, just simply go to SAP Community, raise your questions if you have any further coming up after this call. Or read some of the great blog posts from people that share their experience. With that, I think we can end this call. Thank you very much again, Sebastian, and the audience for watching. Hope to see you all in one of the next calls again. Take care. Have a good rest of day.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Bye.
Bye. Okay, live stream.